morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. My name's John. I'm here with Christos and Sahil. This is the 45 show, an identity show about a whole lot more than just identity. So, how are you doing this morning, Christos?
I am good. It's Friday. The weather is so-so, and I'm super excited for us to be here. It is funny how yesterday we spent a whole lot of time trying to come up with a description about what the 45 show. It's an identity show that's more than just identity, which is fun because we're building all these exciting things.
That's right.
And we bring so many guests. And today we have an esteemed colleague and a very, very good developer with us. Yesterday we did our community news, so I don't have anything new today to talk about. And we're going to be doing a blog, which we'll be pushing out hopefully today with all the news and excitements and the things that we link to. But you can expect us to have the community news here going forward every Friday. So that's exciting. And today we have Mr. Sahil, who is a PM. In fact, he said he's a developer wrapped in a PM role because he does all these amazing things. And he's here to talk to us about Azure CLI, a little bit of Cloud Shell. There's a little bit of tension about Cloud Shell. We're talking about this before we got on. And then tokens, authorization, and what have you. So if you were ever curious about how these things work, then Sahil is here to talk to us about these things. Hey, Sahil, how are you doing this morning, bud?
Hey, how are you?
We're good. We're super excited you're here.
Good.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a good day.
So, and you're East Coast with me, aren't you?
I am. So, but I wake up late, so I'm practically on PST anyway.
No, I know that feeling. See, I wake up early because I have little kids who are all under 7, and so they wake me up. Natural alarm clocks and all. And but then I get all my work done by 11 a.m. because that's when all my coworkers on the West Coast come in. So if I'm not done by 11, I'm done for the day because then I sit in meetings the rest of the day. So
yeah, there's all meetings. Yeah, that's the thing. I think whether you like it or not, you sort of end up working on PST anyway because so many of your colleagues are over there.
Yeah,
so.
involuntary PST.
Yeah.
So cool. All right. Well, so what are you going to talk to us about today?
I thought we should maybe, because Microsoft loves Linux.
We do. We love Linux.
Yeah, I mean, the last I heard was like 20% of the VMs on Azure are Linux, right? And
I was checking that number, in fact, because I did an open source talk a couple of weeks ago for Oktoberfest. We're at about 52% right now. Half
Linux.
of the workloads on half of the workloads on Azure are running Linux, and that's about 52%. So we actually keep the balance. More people are running Linux, and why not, right? .NET Core, Azure CLI, PowerShell, they run everywhere. So why not play with whatever suits you best? If you like Linux, you can do it. In fact, WSL is so awesome, right? I don't know how many of you out there use WSL, but the fact that you can run Linux natively inside Windows, can you imagine 15 years ago going to some of our CVPs and saying, hey, I'm thinking about creating this kind of Linux environment inside Windows. We would have been laughed off, right? Today, it's de facto.
I think it's an absolutely amazing time we're going through running through. Yeah, but I think the reason I think a lot of people run Linux is because it's so lightweight and it's so powerful. So I figured one of the things we should talk about is this tool that Microsoft has called Azure CLI.
Yeah.
Because personally, what I like about Linux is that you can just SSH into a machine that is so you can SSH on Ubuntu running in DeX mode on a Samsung phone. Right? I mean, that's the power of it, right? So
it is.
It's and I think that's the flexibility and the tools you get there is why it's become so popular. And I think for us developers, especially because we're the laziest people you'll ever run into, we want to automate things, and that pretty much means terminal, CLI, that sort of thing, right? So I figured let's chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Someone, Exegate is saying, when is Windows switching to Linux Core? Sarcasm, obviously. And I said, you never know. Now, obviously, it would be awesome if we could achieve something like that, different versions of Windows. But I said it's above my pay grade, so I can definitely not influence the decision.
Well, I mean, the fact that
keep the question.
The fact that you can still run like Encarta 97 and Windows 10, I mean, compatibility, the backwards compatibility is amazing. So, yeah.
Windows 95 on the browser, my friend.
We definitely need more of that. It's funny you mentioned.
I remember Scott Hanselman back maybe a few years saying, your tabs are now your VMs. The fact that you can run Linux on the browser, and the fact that you can run Windows 95 on a browser tab, it's just insane. The full operating system written in JavaScript.
You mentioned.
Well, that's why I use Chrome and 64 gigs of RAM, because I can run tabs at the same time.
Well, you've done your VMs, man.
Yeah.
You mentioned Dex. We were on vacation over the summer, and being able to plug in my phone into Dex and use VS Code Spaces or GitHub Code Spaces now, I guess. It's pretty awesome. Like, I had my phone. Like, the biggest thing I had was a monitor I was carting around. People at the coffee shop were looking at me like, "Why is this guy carting around a monitor?" And it's like, well, because I can work here.
Yeah.
Can't carry around a 27-inch laptop. I'd look like a fool. But
yeah. And I think the new phones even do wireless Dex.
I think something like that.
Yeah. It's insane. It's insane what's going on. I think, it's an exciting time we're living through. So VS Code, Terminal, that's the world I prefer to live in, although sometimes you do end up RDPing to a Windows machine because customers use everything. Yeah. So anyway.
All right. So Azure CLI, what do we? We use that all the time. We were just working on a managed service identity plugin for GitHub Actions, so you can use managed identity.
Yes.
We're just doing that yesterday.
That's actually right. And John is writing the blog post. Hopefully, it will be going out today. Not promising, but John has worked on an amazing an extension to allow you to do managed identities for your actions running on a VM, GitHub Actions, which means that you don't have to pass any credentials into your pipeline. Secure DevOps out of the box.
Wow. Is it a VM? Like, does it matter what kind of VM?
As long as it's an Azure VM that you can enable managed identity on, doesn't matter if it's Windows, Linux, because the GitHub Actions runner runs on any of them.
So, container? Can I use a container, or is it just VM for now?
No.
So don't say container to JP, because...
No, you should be able to use it. You should be able to, because ACI, Azure Container Instances, supports MSI2 now.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And ACI supports managed identity, right?
Yeah. Oh, so
that's like those DevOps agents, just a lot better.
Yeah, exactly. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So you want to have your own machine that's got all sorts of specific tools or custom tools, or if you want it off of the internet, you want to do it from your own network, from your own VNet in Azure.
Yeah.
No sweat. Just fire it up, and because that was a problem we were having with our deployment, was like, well, I don't want to have credentials I store in GitHub that I have to rotate. That's going to be a huge pain.
So that's an interesting message from Damien Bowden, who says that the Azure CLI is missing important components like the ability to do app registrations.
Let's talk about that then.
Oh, there you go. You stole Sahil's thunder.
Sahil, I love that your machine's name is Big Mac, by the way.
Big Mac, yeah. Never Mac, right? So Big Mac, yeah. Cool. So should we dive in?
Let's go.
Absolutely. That's why we're going here.
Yeah. Okay, so here is the coolest thing about Azure CLI, that in order to run it, you don't even need to install it. You just go to a site called shell.azure.com, go ahead and log in, and I think this allows me to pick a tenant. And as you go through years, you collect tenants, so I have so many. So I click on one, and boom, boom, boom.
Can we zoom in a little bit, please, Mr. Sahil? So
font size?
Font size.
Okay. So there you go.
I'm old, so I need I don't have glasses yet, so I need you to zoom in.
All good. Yeah, font is good. Some people might be watching on a phone. So so bingo. Here we go. We're in Azure CLI. That's how easy it is to set this up. And if you have the Azure app on your iOS or Android phone, there's a tab.
Somebody says 2 more bumps on the zoom in, please, which is, we're about 200%. Perfect. Thank you, Exegate.
So where are you seeing this chat? I'm not seeing it, but okay, I'll just take your word for it. So I apologize if I can't read the chat in parallel. But yeah, this is it. So we're using Azure CLI. Right here, you type AZ and hit enter, and you're using Azure CLI, right? And of course, if you've got an Android phone or an iOS phone, you can simply, there's a tab there in the app, you sign in, and you can use Azure CLI right from your phone and see all the things you can do with Azure CLI. So I think there's something really, really cool about being able to provision so much in the cloud from your phone. I mean, that's just science fiction. It's really, really cool. So that's certainly like one way to use Azure CLI, right? Mm-hmm. And that is cool, but who the hell likes to type in a browser except Christos, right? So,
whoa, wait a minute. Now, that was, I mean, if I can have my Windows 95 on the browser, why not have Cloud Cell, right? So for me, if I want to quickly test something, I don't have to install anything. So sometimes I have a VM that I do most of my dev work, but I don't want to spin up my VM if I want to do something quickly. I can go to my browser, use my Azure CLI, and be done with it, right? I don't have to spin anything up. I also use the Azure CLI inside the portal. So if you didn't know that, inside the portal, the Azure portal, you can actually spin up the Azure CLI. You can switch between PowerShell and Azure CLI, so I don't have to install both on my machine. Yeah. And now you can have a custom container with Cloud Cell, which means that you can also install custom tools like an extra language. If you don't want the install Python language runtime, then you can actually go install your Python runtime and have it double. So I think Cloud Cell is a fantastic tool for certain occasions, not for every time or not for every situation.
Yeah.
But I love Cloud Cell.
I agree with all of that. And the thing is, I use that when I'm on a machine where I just want to get something quick done and nothing to install, etc. But on my local machine here that I'm on right now, so I use Conda to have different Python environments. But let's say if I didn't want to disturb anything, I can just run it as a Docker image. So I can say docker run-it mcr.microsoft.com, let's see, Azure-CLI. Let's hope this is correct. And I hit enter, and it'll just download the Azure CLI Docker image and just give it a second. So Docker is allegedly very quick, but if you think about what's happening, it is literally downloading a virtual machine, right? So it's pretty impressive what it's doing right on the fly, live. So 95, here we go, come on. So this is dependent on my bandwidth, and boom, I'm in Bash, and I have Azure CLI here. I mean, nothing to install, right? And then what I can do is that I can customize this. I do a lot of my dev in Docker, to be honest, because it's so lightweight. It's almost like starts as fast as Notepad. And I can snapshot it. I can revert it back to the original image. I can mount a local volume, so I have my regular Git integration working. VS Code just sort of remotes into Docker. It's a very, very productive way of doing things. So I love Docker. I publish Docker images to a private ACR registry, and somebody says, hey, we have a Node 6 customer, Docker, boom, right?
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, there's like NVM and all that, just almost, maybe I don't understand those well enough, but they just almost end up messing my machine up, right? So these older versions, I don't want older versions.
Exactly. You don't want to have 20 versions of, like if you want to test .NET 5, right? You don't have to install it now because it's not released yet. You can actually put it into a container and you're done. So from that perspective, you can have throwaway test environments, dev environments. Although these days with the new code spaces, you may be able to get around it and use that one instead if you want to. So that's another option.
Yeah,
How many have used the code spaces yet? Have you had your invite? Have you guys managed to spin up one?
You're asking the audience, I assume?
Asking everyone, whoever is watching it.
I use code spaces. I like them. Big fan. And I like that it syncs all my stuff. Yeah, I'm a big fan of them. Makes it a lot easier.
Exegate says no invite yet. Yeah, sorry. This will be coming out soon.
Happens, right? Okay, cool. So now I'm on my local machine, and I've used Homebrew to install Azure CLI. So I've already installed it on a Windows machine.
So for people that don't know, what is Homebrew?
It's like sort of like chocolatey for Windows. It's a package manager. I can just say brew, install, and then pass in whatever I want to install, and it'll install it. And then if I want to uninstall, I say brew uninstall. If I want to upgrade it, I say brew upgrade. So if I want to be in the newest version of Azure CLI, for instance, say brew upgrade Azure CLI, boom, hit enter, and I get the newest version of Azure.
It's like apt-get.
Yes, exactly. The apt-get is Linux. And yes, if you want to install Azure CLI on Linux, you would use apt-get. So yeah, so installing Azure CLI is very easy. You can do it even unattended, etc. if you want. So now that I've installed it, how do I use it? So this is the command you need to remember, AZ. That's it, right?
Yeah.
So you just type AZ, hit enter, and it'll sort of tell you what it can do, right? So right here, it tells you exactly all the things that Azure CLI lets you do. And you can extend this, right? So you can write your own extensions, you can host them somewhere. So there's a lot of stuff that Azure CLI can do. But the first thing you need to do before you can use it, you have to log in. So type AZ login to be able to log in. But on this particular machine, I've already logged in. So what it does is that it creates a directory in my root called .azure. And if I look inside of here, there are a bunch of things here. Look at this, right? So it's just going to piggyback my previous session.
Right.
Right. And here's the cool thing. All the other CLIs like Office 365 CLI and Terraform, and we're exploring into this Graph CLI, they piggyback off of the same token cache. So all of them sort of share the same session.
Yeah, even right? the Azure SDK is tapping into that. So if you use Azure Identity, which is the thing that authenticates your Azure SDK libraries on any language you use, they look into, you can actually use the Azure CLI as the token provider. So if you already authenticate with that on your local machine, you can use that to authenticate against Azure.
Yeah, or rather anybody can be anybody's token provider, so share the same session. And yeah, exactly. It's very, very cool. I think even VS Code piggybacks on this now, doesn't it? I don't know, but either way, it's like mega cool. So now if I want to log in, so another command that you need to know is that anytime you're confused about Azure CLI, is type -H to say, hey, what does this command do? And you see that there's so many different ways to log into Azure CLI. For example, if I want to log in into just Azure AD, in which I don't have an Azure subscription, I just say allow no subscriptions, right? So if you want to manage just Azure AD, a brand new Azure AD with no subscription, that's a very typical thing people do. I want to be able to say sign in using a RPC or service principal. I can use this. I can sign in using a service principal directly, sign into a particular tenant directly so that I don't have to switch tenants after I sign in, and so on and so forth, right? This is a really cool one. I can sign in using a managed identity. Right? Yeah. So how do I get an access token for a managed identity? Just think about it. Like if I'm like doing my dev work and I want to say, how does this behave for that managed identity?
Right.
So I provision a VM in the cloud because managed identity only runs in the cloud, right? And VM or a Docker image, SSH into it, Azure CLI, login using managed identity, and then later on I'll show how to get an access token. And now you have an access token for that managed identity that you can play with.
So some people on the show may not know what a managed identity is. Should we explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So managed identity, an identity is a wonderful thing, right? Like as in this user did blah. So you just have some traceability, auditability, authentication, authorization, all that is tied to an identity.
Yep.
But an identity is tied to a credential, and managing those credentials is a royal pain. Managed identity gives you an identity without the headache of managing credentials. So nice. Azure will transparently manage the credential for you, never have to worry about it, and you have an identity, just use it, assign it and use it. So that's a managed identity.
Perfect.
So, yeah, it's mega cool. Cool.
I'm going to paste a link on the chat so people know what it is and they can read the docs. We have a huge number of services that actually support managed identities like VMs, app service, functions, and then back-end service like SQL, I don't think Cosmos DB supports managed identity yet, and other services. So your web app can speak to a SQL Server or Service Bus without having to pass any credentials or connection strings, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, and it's
I'd love to know.
It is at the end of the day an Azure AD identity, and the advantage there means that it can be used for anything that's secured by Azure AD. So that could be Azure Storage and Azure SQL, but it could be your APIs too. So if you have multiple functions, for example, multiple Azure functions that are running, or multiple web apps that are running, or a web app that's running in a VM and a function that's hosting an API that's protected by Azure AD, then your managed identity can also use that to talk to these other APIs, and it's it's a huge win. It's one of those things that you don't realize how great it is until you do it the old way, until you have to manage credentials for dozens and dozens of different apps. It solves a problem that if you've never had to deal with that credential management, it's a huge pain otherwise, and it does it all for you. It makes it so much nicer because you don't have to worry about it at all. So yeah, it's much. I use them as much as possible for nearly everything.
Yeah. I think from a developer perspective and for enterprise and companies and teams, as you work with code and as you need to speak to other services and stuff, the fact that you don't have to think about storing credentials anywhere near code, whether that's a config or a secret or an environment variable or key vault, like it eliminates the need to have to do that. So from my perspective, it makes developers' lives a lot easier. It makes enterprise lives a lot easier because they don't have to have leaked credentials or store credentials in source code, which many people do. So managed identity is the next step up. I would highly advise people to look into that and start using it as much as possible.
Yeah, 100%. You don't have to roll over credentials. We roll it over automatically. Yeah, it's awesome. Cool. So I said that I'm already logged in here, so I can just say AZ account show. I think that was the command, and it tells me exactly what I'm logged into. Or I can say, if I ever forget who I am, I can say AZ AD signed in user show, and it tells me who am I signed in as, right? So This is my profile. It's calling graph to do that, but actually it uses AD graph, which we don't recommend anymore. But there's a lot of historical. So
are you saying that it still uses AD graph for now, but it will be changing to MS graph eventually?
Yeah, but there's a lot of inertia there, right? They've written a lot of code, but yes, certainly going forward they'll be using more and more MS graph. So that's definitely the case.
WimVP says Cloud Shell is also running in Windows Admin Center. I did not know that. Thank you for letting us know. That's brilliant.
Awesome. So so I mean, what can we do with this? So since this is like a little focus on identity, let's pick up. So obviously, like I can do AZ VM and create a VM, AZ storage and create storage accounts and all that. But let's talk a little bit like what can you do in the Azure AD world, for example. So there is a module called AD, stands for Active Directory, and that is where everything to do with Azure AD resides. So AZ AD, and I can say -H. And it'll tell me all the things that you can do. So how do you manage applications with Azure CLI? I think there was a question earlier. AZ AD app. So what can we do there? AZ AD app -H and create, delete, list, show, update. So yeah, you can now create apps. It wasn't there earlier, so fair point. But now
there you go, Damien.
So yeah,
your prayer is answered. So Damien Bowden, if you're still around, now you can actually manage your app registrations via Azure CLI. Boom. Yeah. You heard it here first.
So, that's awesome, isn't it? So I wanted to see, for example, hey, what service principals do I have here? So I can say AZADSP list, hit enter. And these are the service principals that exist in my particular tenancy. Or I can say AZAD, the same command -all, because by default it'll return only 200. But if I have more than that, I can say -all, and it'll return me all of them, right?
I hope you don't have more than 200. Do you have more than 200?
I hope not. But generally speaking, that command applies to, I don't know how many I have, but we can count those, right?
And there is some magic food that you can do to output in a different format rather than JSON, right?
Oh, yeah. -output, yeah. But actually, so JSON is very, very cool. So one of the things that all of these commands support is --query, right? So what --query lets you do is that, let's say that, this is like a wall of ASCII that has been thrown on my face, and say, I just want to know, let's say, all the names, right? So what are the names of the various service principals I have? So I can just pass this weird syntax, which is called as JMES queries, and hit enter, and it lets me do all sorts of things where I can say filter for a name, or match this criterion, format it this way, concatenate these values, whatever. And these are the names of all the service principals that I have. Of course, I can pass this into another command. I can work with this data, all that good stuff, right? And what you were saying, Chris, is there a different format I can output this to?
I think if you do -O and then you select table, or just as output table, then it should return the results into table format.
Yep, and this table is so easy to read too.
well.
No, but here's the thing. I'm on a Linux machine, right? So I have tools like
check that out.
So I can say print dollar. Oops. I can't type today. So print $2 like this. Hit enter, and boom. So that's the second column, and that's the names of my service principals, and it formats it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it must be my eyes or you're a little out of focus. I don't know, but yeah. So yeah, so there are a lot of like amazing things you can do with this. But here is another really cool thing you can do with Azure CLI. So for example, Azure CLI has got this thing called extension. And there is this extension called Find, which was so useful that they actually made it part of Azure CLI. So it's just here now. But if I wanted to install it, I can say extension -n and then the name of the extension. But what Azure Find extension does is that it uses some artificial intelligence. It's an engine called Aladdin, and they use that to sort of help you find what you're trying to do with Azure CLI. So I don't know, like give me something that you can do with Azure in plain English. Like just pick anything.
VM. Create VM, I think.
No, that you're giving me a search query. Tell me something in English. How to create a VM?
Yeah, create
a
VM. Yeah.
So right there, it says create an Azure virtual machine. Right?
That's awesome. I've never seen this before. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, it uses AI behind the scenes, and they do machine learning, and they take the most popular or the most established commands around a subject like VM, and they show you the most prominent examples of how you create a VM. So it helps you find that. There's also an interactive. Are you going to show interactive?
I will, yeah.
I stole your thunder, damn it. But I knew it.
Well, I wasn't planning on, but since you bring it, so no, you didn't steal any thunder, so that's cool. So here you go. How to create an app, or how to list service principals, right? And it's pretty cool that it lets you do all of this, right? So very amazing. You're talking about interactive. Mm-hmm. So there is this thing called AZ Interactive. Now, all these terminal stuff is very, very cool, but doesn't give you IntelliSense, right?
Yeah.
Wrong. You can get IntelliSense. So you can say AZ Interactive. Now, I don't use AZ Interactive a lot because I think it slows me down. There are other ways of getting IntelliSense. You can do tab completion, and I have that written up on my blog. Oh, my blog is www.winsmarts.com, by the way. But
we'll add the link to the chat so people can go and have a look at that.
Cool. So I can say AZ, AD. See, look at that amazing IntelliSense, right?
Yeah.
Now, again, I don't use this because it just slows me down, so I'll just exit out of that, right? But yes, you got AZ Interactive too. But I think once you get used to it, then you'll probably...
Sahil is faster than IntelliCode or IntelliSense. There you go.
I don't know about that. So yeah, okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit, like bring it even closer to identity now. So so let's see. Okay, so we got something called Azure AD groups, right?
Yeah.
And let's say that you are trying to do something with Azure CLI, and you're like, it's not giving me the data that I thought it would. So I can say AZ AD group. And oh, by the way, this works with not just groups or AD, it works with all over Azure CLI. I can do this debug, verbose, and hit enter. Verbose, one more time, and check this out. It tells you exactly the request it sent, where it sent the request to.
Very nice. Look at that graph behind the scenes. Love graph.
Yeah. How long did the command take to execute? Whole bunch of other interesting logging. So where I find this really useful is that if there's an error I'm running into or something like that, because all the Python code is sitting somewhere on my disk, I can just load that in VS Code, set a breakpoint there, and just run the Azure CLI command, and then zoom in there and then just debug what they've written, right?
And then fix the code and send the PR.
I have actually done that.
Amazing. There you go.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? I mean, it's like the world is getting smaller. It's amazing. Cool. So here's another cool thing I use all the time. How many times for dev purposes have you had to get an access token?
All the time.
All the time.
All the time.
All the
right?
time.
So you can just do this. Boom, we got a token, my friend.
What? What? What is this magic?
This magic is a one-liner command.
So that's built into the CLI?
It's built into Azure CLI.
Yep.
And which token is that? What is this token getting you? Like what can I do with this token?
I'm glad you asked. DD scripts, decrypt token, and I'll just paste the token, hit enter, and this is the token.
And decrypt token inside the. I mean,
Right
that's
on the CLI.
damn, man. JP, do you know about this?
Yeah, but
Huh?
we've used get access token quite a few times when we need privileged tokens that we can't get with our own applications. I use it all the time because it has things like directory access as user all.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
So that's true. This token has been returned as the person that was logged in, right?
Mhm.
So that is this person right here. So you bring a good point, because what app ID did we use here? So Azure CLI has its own app ID, and that's what you're using, right? But if you wanted a more restricted token, here's what you can do. You can create a service principal. You can grant that service principal limited rights, log in using Azure CLI to that service principal, and run the same command again.
Yep.
And then you'll get a restricted token too.
Yep.
So
That's awesome.
yeah.
We have a question from Teddy Daniels. The machine learning module used in the Azure CLI that you showed earlier are executed in the computer, or is it a request made to Azure?
Local.
Is it local?
AZ
I think
find.
Easy find. I think it's doing a request over the browser. I mean, we haven't tested yet. I don't know.
I don't know.
Unplug your Ethernet and test it.
Yeah, if I disconnect.
Not right now because you're here. But yeah, don't do it right now because then you'll be gone. But
Yeah. No, I mean, I have run that on an airplane, for example, and it works. So it must have some local capability.
Maybe
So
some local cache with the most popular ones. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
I think they like build a model and they include it with that. And then there is probably some like telemetry data that they drive off of it. I don't know. We know what?
Well,
What
let's
is
keep
Azure
let's
CLI?
keep this question, because we are having the Cloud Cell lead PM coming to our show very shortly. I think it's around November. So we can ask them all these like behind the scenes questions and roadmap stuff. But that you raise a very good point, Teddy.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking.
No, actually, you know what? We're working with the Azure CLI team, so I'll just ask them and see what they say, and I'll tweet it. So later on, when I find out. So,
Follow Sahil Malik on Twitter. I'll put
at
his name
Sahil
down.
Malik, right? That's my.
Yeah.
Don't mind the jokes, but that actually no, I don't tweet too many jokes on Twitter at least. So yeah, cool. No, I do actually. Okay, but I should watch myself.
it's okay.
So yeah, we're decrypting the token. How did I decrypt the token? Again, it's a simple script I have here to decrypt the token. So basically, a token is what? Just 3 strings separated by dots, and I just need to base64 decode them, right? So that's what it is. So as you can see the script here, that's exactly what I'm doing.
What is this? M76I is asking, what is this? I don't know what this refers to, but if you can be more specific, we can answer the question. And Sahil, somebody called Code with Sean, is a big fan of yours. He's been following you on all magazine articles. Smart guy.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Who's that?
Code with Sean.
Awesome. I don't know what their real name is, but thank you. Awesome.
I suspect that it's a Sean in their name, but
He's an MVP.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's an MVP.
Yeah, we've talked to him
Very
a few
cool.
times. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay, if I see their avatar, I'll know.
So you're using it's get access token, right? And you can get one for any resource, like any. You don't have. It doesn't have to be just graph. It could be anything, right?
So here's the thing: you're using this app ID of Azure CLI.
Yep.
So Azure CLI is whitelisted to call certain things. Graph is one of them. Management.azure is one of them. But it's not just like any arbitrary thing. Like if you create your own API, then no. But what you can do in that case is create your own service principal, log in as that service principal, grant that service principal rights to call your API,
Right.
and then you can get tokens for any API. Yeah.
So there's a question on the chat. Damien's asking, can get access token request different scopes? Do you have a link to the docs, by the way? I suspect that for the Azure CLI.
I think it's all still V1, so you request it for the whole resource, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you get everything that has already been consented to.
Yeah.
And if you want to use another scope that is not consented to, you go the service principal route.
Okay.
Right.
So
Nice.
actually, let me share a link here. So like everything that we're saying here is actually, I've blogged about it. So get access token here, I think. So yeah, this is here, and no, that was a different one. Get access token.
Is that a WordPress website, Sahil?
No, it's Medium. It's the simplest way I could set up a blog, and
I didn't know Medium came with a search. Nice.
Yeah, like you can have your custom domain insert on it. Yep, that's awesome. They allow you to export your data too if I decide to move.
Yeah,
but look at this.
I moved from Medium to GitHub.
Sorry?
I moved from Medium to GitHub Pages with using that export.
Yeah, I should do that. I mean, GitHub Pages are awesome. It's just HTML you post there, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I have some utilities I've written there. So.
Yeah, send us a link to it. We'll make sure it gets in the chat.
Awesome, thank you.
Exactly.
Let me actually send that to you in chat right now while we're at it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, okay, so let's continue diving further into this. So I have an access token. What can I do with that access token? It's not in my clipboard, so let me get a new one. Here we go. So let me actually paste that somewhere where I won't lose it. So I have the access token in like Notepad somewhere, and now I want to execute REST queries, and I want to play with it. So I can say curl, but actually I don't even need to do that. So what would happen with curl? I can execute REST API commands, right? Mm-hmm. But actually the Azure CLI has a sort of built into it. I can just say az rest -- URL.
Okay.
And let's pass in a graph URL. So graph.microsoft.com/v1.o. So /me, hit enter, and it calls Microsoft Graph and it spews out the output.
Also, you can actually do curl with the AZ REST.
Well, AZ REST will negotiate the token for you. So curl is like two steps, right? So curl is a little bit more static. Yeah. So AZ REST will it's like a wrapper around curl. That's one way to think of it. But basically, it will negotiate the token for you.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah. So imagine what this does for like DevOps scenarios, like the earlier thing we were talking about, that through Git actions, you like manage ID that plugin that JP is about to publish. Imagine that now you have the power of Graph behind that, running as a managed ID, with the least privilege.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes.
I think that's pretty insane.
Well, assuming too that you could use AZ REST against like management.azure.com for the Azure REST API too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then, of course, since we're working on a Linux environment, I can pipe this to utilities. I can parse this JSON, make it a little bit easier to read. So that's certainly something I can do. Another thing we run into all the time is that, when we look at a token, so let's go back to the token that I had, scripts and decrypt the token, hit enter. Oh, of course, I need to paste the token to decrypt it. So this is the token. And these are like issued at, not before an expiration, but they're in Unix, and they're basically the validity of the token, right? Like how long is the token valid for? So it is a fallacy that Azure AD tokens are valid for 1 hour. Access tokens. They're actually valid for 1 hour, 5 minutes.
Don't tell them.
Of course they are.
It's a little grace time we have, right? So just in case. But
did somebody screw up the Unix calculations on the tokens?
No, they didn't screw up. It's just that we give an extra 5 minutes if you're renewing a token. Our libraries all do 1 hour, and that's the assumption they use. But behind the scenes, it's actually 1 hour, 5 minutes. So, but here is if you want this number, if you wanted to convert this, for example, into a time that we understand, you can say date R and just paste in this, and it'll tell you exactly what time it is, right? In your local time, so it's a little bit more legible.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's the Unix terminal is so powerful. I mean, I just love it. So yeah. So let's see. Let's take this further, right? So Azure CLI is awesome. We know that we have the power of Graph behind it. We know we have the power of management.azure.com behind it. Just those two and more, and your custom APIs. I mean, you can automate the hell out of really anything at that point, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think automating things is a problem now. It's not holding us back. But then management of this automation becomes a problem because there's so much you can do. We can write so much code. And one of the very common things people use is something called as Terraform.
Yes.
So CD download. Okay, great. Hold on. Let me do something. These are my two stupid dogs, by the way.
Wow.
At some
They
point.
they look ready to go.
Yeah, they'll probably walk in at some point, like, oh, we're interested in Azure CLI too.
Sound like my kids.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So there's this amazing thing called Terraform, and it is actually part of shell.azure.com. You don't need to install it or
Can
anything.
we do 2 more clicks, Sahil?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, sir.
Better?
Think so.
Cool.
Yeah, should be better now.
Okay, so so the way Terraform works is actually very, very cool. Is that you describe what you want, right? And then you have Terraform see, hey, what's actually in the real world? And then it'll reconcile those changes and it'll help you apply them. And it'll tell you that if I apply this, these are the changes I'll make. And then you can destroy everything with one command. So it's got like a rollback built into it. So this is really, really amazing. And a lot of actually enterprises use this. Now, why is this really powerful? Is because in a real world project with a lot of complex interdependent infrastructure, it's not a question of just build something and go away. In the real world, you end up inheriting something from somebody else. There's somebody else that built, or you go through versions or disaster recovery. All those things become very, very important, right? So I'll give you an example here that I wrote up quickly last night. So if I were to do cat config.tf, you see over here that this huge JSON over here. It's not that big, but Terraform works on this concept of providers. So we have a provider called Azure AD. So Terraform is cross-platform. It can work with AWS, Azure AD, whatever. And here we're basically saying that we're going to provision an Azure AD application using Terraform, right? And the details of that application are all captured in here. See this? All of these details are captured in here. So it's a moderately complex application, if you see. So let me do this. So mkdir temp, let's start on a fresh slate, right? So mkdir temp, and I'm going to say copy this config.tf to temp, and let's go into temp. And now I have an empty directory, well, not empty, but with just one file, config.tf. While I'm at it, let me actually make sure. I think I was playing with this last night, so let me see if that app is already there. It's not. Okay, we're ready to go. So these are all the apps that I had. Okay, so Terraform, the way it works is that now I have this config.tf, and at the very top here, I've specified that I'm taking a dependency on certain providers. So the first command I'll execute is terraform init. And terraform init is going to basically download the necessary providers. And if I do lsalx, it'll tell me create a directory called .terraform. It's downloaded a bunch of things that basically got me ready to go. Next thing I'll do, I'll say terraform plan. What terraform plan does is that it'll go online to my Azure AD. And again, it just piggybacked on my Azure CLI credentials. And it basically saw that, hey, these are the changes you're requesting. And Terraform is going to do these changes. It is going to do a create. And these are the changes it is going to make. Well, all these pluses by them, right? So this is like that -- what if in PowerShell.
Yeah.
Right? So as an administrator, would you like to have this capability as in what happens if I run this command? Is it going to blow up my infrastructure? Exactly what will happen. And then I can check in this code or as a log or somewhere so I know what happened at a certain step, right? That's the beauty of it. And then I can just say terraform apply, and now these changes are applied to the real world, right? So
nice.
Yes, and it'll go ahead and provision this application for me. This application is a moderately complex application, somewhat real world, as in that it has certain API permissions, it's exposing an API, it is got some redirect URIs, etc., etc. Right?
And is this Terraform running as the context, the logged in user to CLI, or do you have to?
Yeah.
Can we pass a separate, say, service principal to securely perform that if we wanted to have a different context?
You can do AZ login with service principal.
But you cannot pass a service principal as part of the Terraform command, can you?
I'm not sure because it piggybacks on the same. It may be possible. I don't know. You can do Terraform Edge and it'll tell you. But I don't think. I think it piggybacks on Azure CLI. But we can check into that, right? But there you go. So our application is now provisioned.
No active. So somebody is asking. MR Extremely is asking. No Active Directory tutorials. Well, we're doing identity with Azure CLI. On the 4 to 5 show, we touch everything that has to do with identity. Sometimes we do Active Directory tutorials, but is there anything specific that you would like us to cover in the future? Let us know in the chat, and we will make sure we slot it in. Today, it's CLI and identity. So a lot of interesting things from Mr. Sahil here, learning so many things.
So Terraform, so one of the things with Terraform here is that, like, what else can you do with this? Of course, you can provision very complex infrastructure, but now imagine if somebody changes something in the real world, let's say through the Azure portal. Terraform has a command called Terraform refresh. And with Terraform refresh, I can go and I can say, reconcile what is online in the real world versus what's in my config.tf, right? So those are the kinds of things that Terraform lets you do. Okay, how many times have we heard that somebody has created an application and they want to move it from test to prod? Or they just want to document the state of an application. I mean, have we run into this required all the time, right?
Oh yeah.
So let's try this. So I'm going to create a new directory. Let's call it temp2.
So is this giving you a snapshot of the state of the app at the time that you run it?
Yeah.
Is that what we're trying to do now?
Yeah. And then you can move it between environments too with a few tweaks.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is there not an Azure service that also does that? I think it's Azure configuration or something like that.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me find.
So many different ways of doing it. So yeah. So I created a new directory. Let me go ahead and create a new config.tf here. And I'm going to say code config.tf. Let's open this in VS Code. I'm going to bring my VS Code onto this screen here. And here, let me go ahead and create the world's most basic Terraform. Let me increase the font size a little. Let me create the world's most basic Terraform file. So provider Azure AD. And let's say that I want to capture the state of a particular application. So I'm going to say Azure AD application. And I'll just call it test because I don't know what its name is, and just save it here, right? So I've created the world's most basic config.tf. Let's go ahead and close this. So now that I've created the config.tf, I'll say Terraform init, right? Now this app that we had just created, the one that we just created using Terraform called Our Fantastic App. For a moment, imagine that particular app, somebody else created it and they left the company or whatever. And now I need to document what that app has. So let me get the GUID of that app. So it is this is the GUID of the app right here. Copy. Now I can do something like this. Terraform import Azure AD application.test and just pass in that GUID, hit enter. And let's see what it did. It created a file called terraform.tf state.
Right.
So I can look at what this file looks like, and this is my entire application documented out.
Also, when you were talking about application, you were talking about Azure AD application,
Azure AD, yeah.
not a web application, right?
Well, Terraform can manage web apps too, app services. So you can use the same technique with web apps, app services. So many Azure resources, right?
So if I use this one, what's the difference of going into the portal and looking at that? Is it just a programmatic way of doing it?
This is how I was able to sort of save the state of the application.
Right.
So if I want to move between environments, now I can write a little script to, these GUIDs obviously are going to change between environments. So it's less than perfect, but at least saving the state, like what existed at that time, right? But then I can just write a little script to like manage these GUIDs and move from test to prod.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, like I go to the portal, point click, configure a really complicated application with a lot of things going on in it.
Yeah.
Export the state, move it to another environment.
Well, I think that,
And this is using. Sorry, go on,
we
JP.
get. I mean, we've heard this because I used to work with customers every day. That was my whole job, and that was one of the biggest questions. Right? Was, well, I've got an ARM template, for example, for deploying all my Azure resources, but I've still got to go either script or call an API or do something else to go do all of my Azure AD stuff. And so it's always been asked of like, well, yeah, I'd love to migrate my app through these environments, but I've got 99% of it expressed in ARM, and I have to go do my app registrations manually. And so, you know, the fact that they're treated like any other resource in Terraform, it simplifies dramatically. Like that's the kind of developer experience we want to see with Azure AD.
And the other benefit, as code with Sean is saying, is that Terraform files can also be checked into source control, so you can have this kind of infrastructure as code and automate that, programmatically do that, so you almost enterprise your whole solution and can have this kind of automation, which if you can achieve 100% automation, then that's a fantastic place to be because it eliminates the human errors. So it's great to see that, and I think Terraform is using Graph behind the scenes to achieve that. Is that correct?
So it's complex. So Terraform uses Go SDK, and it's really up to them what they use. And Terraform providers are all open source,
right?
So Go there mostly, yes, it is using Graph. Now this is where we need a little feedback from the community. Terraform provider doesn't do everything that Azure AD does, and there's some things actually that they built, and then for some reasons we had to change, and it hasn't kept up. As in, like if I change an app from a single tenant to multi-tenant, that is something that Terraform doesn't do right now, and that's because there's a method for it. It errors out, right, which is a shame, but it's all open source. So a question for the community is two questions. Number one, how much Golang do you use? Like, do you find Golang useful? Because that Terraform is built using Azure Go SDK, right? So, is it worth for us to create an MCell for Go, for example, right? Let us know, loud and clear, and then we'll try and meet that need if that's where it's required. And then between Terraform or calling Graph from CLI directly or ARM templates, what is your ideal DevOps story? If you can give us that feedback, and then we can try and provide that evidence internally and sort of allocate our resources appropriately. So
Go MSAL would be something that we directly include and consume inside Go applications. It's very different to Terraform. So some people said, hey, by the way, using Terraform actually creates an abstraction on top of Go, so they don't have to write that code, which is absolutely right. But I think the MSAL for Go would be a different use case to what Terraform is doing. But like if you are using a specific language and you need to authenticate against our Microsoft platform, identity platform, then if there are gaps, please let us know so we can take that feedback and bring it back to our engineering team so we can build it. So if it's Go, if it's Ruby, if it's, some random language that I haven't used, I don't know, Perl, let us know,
PHP.
And we'll take it back.
Yeah, and JP, please feel free to give me the secret signal to shut up if I'm sharing something NDA.
No, I think
no NDA
think,
so
well,
far.
Hold on, no. I mean, we are a little close. It's a little warm, but that's okay. No, I think if there is actual interest for MSAL with Go, which MSAL is our core library we use for interacting with Azure AD, right? So if you're building applications, we have a library called the Microsoft Authentication Library. That's what you use to get tokens from Azure AD, to sign users in, that sort of thing. And we have them for most major platforms, .NET, Node, front-end JavaScript, PHP, I think. But if you're interested in a language that we don't currently support, let us know. So I dropped all of our contact info in here. So let us know, because what people need is what we want to build, and we want to focus on what people need. So if you need an MSAL for Go, if you want to talk to Azure AD, let us know.
Or B2C, right? We use the same libraries both against Azure AD and B2C. So As a developer, you shouldn't really have two different libraries to do the same thing, just different flavors of backend.
Yep.
And now there's a question on the chat from Mr. Extremely. So is Terraform comparable to Vagrant or more like Puppet or Chef? What do you think?
It's very comparable to Vagrant.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the other product, and that also works with the AD. So yeah, you can use that as well.
But Puppet and Chef are both also infrastructure as code tools, right?
Yeah. So those I'm not so familiar with, but I know Vagrant it is, and I'm getting this. Yeah. So yeah, it's very comparable to Vagrant. Yeah.
Yeah, I think these are all different tools and versions, and like Terraform has an official Azure tool chain or extension.
Terraform and Vagrant are more about standing up sort of different resources, particularly things like cloud resources and Puppet and Chef, which I haven't used Puppet or Chef in probably 5 or 6 years at least, are for managing the infrastructure itself, right? So you get an agent, that Chef agent or Puppet agent's installed on a VM, and that VM gets all of its configuration and state. It's kind of like we've got the same thing for Windows. What is it? PowerShell DSC, Desire State Config. It's kind of like that. So it's more about configuring an individual resource like a server rather than configuring all of the Azure sort of management stuff, like deploy a storage account with this name and this region with those sorts of things. Like that's what Terraform's for.
Yep. Yeah, going back to the libraries that we release, remember that it's not just a question of write a library and ship it. When we ship something as Microsoft, we have to be very cognizant of, hey, is this going to cause security issues?
Yep.
And will we be tweeting on trending on Twitter tomorrow because we released a bad library, right?
For all the wrong reasons.
What's that?
Yeah, it's trending on Twitter for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, exactly. So just people are going to leave issues. They're going to submit pull requests. Somebody needs to review them, and so it's some effort to release it, but that's why we want to be a little judicious of which one we release. So
right, help us, help you,
help us, help you. Exactly. So and here's the cool thing: when I'm done with my demo, poof, Terraform destroy, and everything that I provisioned in the cloud, I hit yes, gone. So keeps my life a little sane as well.
Nice.
And because that was the one that you essentially imported, right? So you pulled that one in from outside or from what was actually out there. Now it really is gone, right? Because configuration drift, like that's 90% of the problem. Is it's great that you scripted this thing, but you've got 15 people have gone out and made a change or whatever since then, and Terraform Destroy doesn't really care because once you've imported it, you have all of that config, and now Destroy is going to get rid of all of it, regardless of what state it's in compared to when it was originally done. Yeah.
And it just keeps your environments clean. I want to set up something for dev purposes that are like 10 dependent things. I can create and destroy it, and I know nothing is left behind, and I want to get a surprise bill afterwards.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is incredible. Okay, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Wow.
I'm up at the end of the hour, and I think we were going to talk about another topic. Should we leave that for another show, or should we continue?
We can save it if you want. We can save it. You come back sometime next week. I mean, or we can push on. We can take a quick break and push on. I leave it totally up to you and the viewers. If they want us to push on, we are happy to push on. Let's just take a quick break so everybody can get some coffee and whatever.
Yeah. I think let's leave that for another show.
Okay.
Sure. Then it's squishing a nice topic into a very short time, and plus it's a separate topic anyway. So let's just wrap this up, button it up. Like today we talk about terminal. Next time we'll talk about something else cool. So
all right.
Should we do that?
Let's do that. Yeah, it feels nice and clean, right?
Yeah,
yes,
leave a little bit of a suspense, and then we can get feedback as in, no, you need to work on your jokes, and we can do that.
Well, we had quite a few pet lovers, so they love the fact that you shared your dogs here. We also had a little bit of debate about feline supporters, so not just dog lovers. There are a couple of questions on the chat, but we can take them in the next hour. And then after Sahil goes on with his work, and we'll be back here in a couple of minutes to continue with our Azure automation and Alexa integration. So stick around if you want to figure out how you can call Alexa and say, hey, Alexa, go and wipe out my VMs, and it will do it for you. We're in the process of building that. So super interesting and exciting. So see you in a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Sahil.
Thank you.